So many years ago, I used to work in a group home, and one of my duties at this group home was I was supposed to wake up the residents, who were mostly teenage, high school level kids, and I would get them up and ready for work or school or whatever it is they were doing in the morning, make sure that they were grooming themselves, make sure they were eating breakfast, make sure they were getting any medications they needed, that kind of thing. And one of the kids in one of the group homes that I worked at was this really huge kid. He had just arms the size of tree trunks. He was really buff. And he was also very quiet. He generally just kind of did his own thing and did whatever he wanted to, and mostly people left him alone. So he didn't really seem that threatening, even though he was gigantic. One morning, he gets up and he decides he doesn't want to brush his teeth and he wants to eat ice cream for breakfast. And I kind of snapped at him and he ignored me. And I said, hey, dude, you got to eat something more substantive than ice cream. You can't just have ice cream in the morning and I need you to brush your teeth. And he went, no. And I said, dude, you have to brush your teeth. And he spun around. He goes, you want to fight? And he started screaming at me. And I backed up and I went, whoa, 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 whoa. No, I don't want to fight you. And then I walked away. And that was kind of the end of that particular interaction. And later on, all that ended up working itself out, but for years, many, many years after that, that incident really, really bothered the heck out of me. And I felt like I did the wrong thing. In this video, I want to talk to you about why I did the wrong thing, even if it was the right thing, even if I didn't do anything technically wrong, why it felt like the wrong thing to me. So stay tuned. All right, in this video, I want to talk to you about the 4 fear responses and what those are and how those can help you to improve and to recognize what patterns that you're stuck in. What are the 4 fear responses? Now, most people have heard of fight or flight. That's 2 of them. That's the most commonly discussed. And a lot of times people will call these the 4 Fs because all of them start with F, fight, flight. The other ones are freeze and fawn. Now, fight or flight, most of us know that one. Fight is the second you are faced with something that scares the heck out of you, you get combative. Flight is kind of the opposite. The second you see something that is scaring the heck out of you, you automatically start trying to get away. You start to run. I used to give out candy to children at Halloween, and I had this like crazy costume that was really, really scary. And little kids would come up, and I always saw one of these 2 responses would happen, or usually one of these 2 responses would happen. Sometimes kids would see me, scream, run away. Sometimes kids would come up and start yelling at me. And like sometimes I even had kids punch my mask when I was wearing this like crazy costume. So those are fight or flight. Freeze is kind of the possum response. That's the, I'm going to freeze and hope that the predator just goes away. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to freeze up. And this can ripple out into other things. Sometimes I had a situation a while back, for example, where I saw tenants in a rental property that I had that were not paying. And I just didn't take any action at all. I was freezing up. And the problem just kept getting worse and worse, and they weren't paying their rent, and then all of a sudden I wasn't paying the mortgage, and it just rippled and snowballed into this crazy situation. That can be a freeze response, where you just basically take no action. You don't run, but you don't fight, you just sit there. The 4th F here is fawn. And fawn is when this is most common in abuse situations. It's essentially where you try to placate the threat. You try to go to the attacker or the thing that's causing you fear, and you say, oh, let me do whatever I can to be nice to you so that you won't hurt me. Again, you most often see this in abuse situations where the abuse victim will run to the abuser and try to do whatever they can to make the abuser happy so that the abuser won't continue their attack. A lot of times you'll see, for example, when you have an abusive husband who's going crazy, wife or might run over to husband and try to do whatever it is that he wants or whatever he likes to try to get him to stop so that he doesn't hurt her or the children or whatever the situation might be. So that's the fawn response. Now let's roll back to the situation I described a minute ago. Now when I was in the group home, I had no idea about any of this stuff. I was not thinking on this level at all. I was just reacting. When this kid turned around and started yelling that he wanted to fight me, I was just, I went into in a total fear response mode. And my response was initially to kind of fawn. I went, whoa, 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 it's okay. I don't want to fight you. Please do whatever you want. and then I ran away. I literally left the room. I walked out of the room. And part of what I later discovered was bothering me so much about that was not necessarily that it was the wrong action per se, and I could argue that it was the wrong action, but that's not the point of this video. What bothered me was that I didn't have control over it. I was just on autopilot. As soon as that thing hit me, I just reacted. And I reacted in one consistent way, which was kind of the thing that I was doing. I was usually doing one of these things, either running away or sometimes freezing. Sometimes, on a rare occasion, I would fawn, although that usually wasn't my go-to. So usually I was either freezing or running from my problems. And later I noticed there was this pattern where if something seemed scary, I didn't want to deal with it, it was more than I could handle, I was drifting into these behavior patterns unknowingly. Now, I want to make very clear that these behavior patterns, when you're dealing with fear responses, are not negative in and of themselves. Sometimes it is perfectly appropriate to fight. You know, when you're facing absolute injustice, you know, or some terrible thing out there, you want to fight. You want to be able to stop the bad guys. But sometimes fighting is not the right thing. You know, sometimes if you're just fighting over something trivial or that doesn't make any sense to fight for, you don't want to fight. In which case, run away, live to fight another day. Or if you're in a situation where the thing that is causing you fear is so powerful that you're going to get obliterated by fighting, fighting is probably a bad idea. At least until you've backed up, run away, and developed a better plan, right? So sometimes these can be good things, sometimes they can be bad things. So they're not inherently negative just because we're talking about them as fear responses. But that's kind of the whole key to this thing, is that if you're always doing just one go-to fear response mechanism, and that's all you do, and you never deal with anything in any other way, then that starts to become a problem, because you're going to inevitably run into situations where you need to graft in one of these other fear responses. And that ultimately comes to, how can you improve what you are doing? And first thing you've got to do is identify what are your fear responses. Go back and you can do this right now. Think about some situations where you were afraid, or you felt overwhelmed, or there was something scary or some situation you didn't like. And think for a second about what is it you did. How did you react to that threat? Did you get combative? Did you just want to run and hide? Did you start to immediately placate the attacker? Did you take zero action whatsoever? Whatever that is, identify that fear response. And then try to establish some trends. Think about a different situation where you had some scary thing hit you. How did you react in that situation? And then look across, see the trends, figure out what your common fear responses are. Once you've identified those, think about the reciprocal. So just to keep the basic ones, the fight or flight, if you are always running, which again was one of my go-tos for a very long time, and it still periodically drift into it. If you are always running, the reciprocal of that is going to be to fight. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be the reciprocal. Just pick a different one so that you're dealing with things in different ways. And more importantly, so that you can choose your responses. And it's not just this default behavior you're always flipping into. And once you think about what the opposite is, so if fighting is the thing that you need to be better at, you need to be better at dealing with conflict by being willing and able to confront it. Not necessarily that you have to, but be willing and capable of confronting that conflict. In that situation now, imagine yourself in one of the situations that you've already been in, and imagine visualize it. You can sit down, close your eyes, and think through what would it have been like to treat it differently, to react differently in these situations. Think about some other situations, visualize those as to how you would deal with them if whatever XYZ happened, and keep doing this over and over and over again. The just general meditation, visualization exercises is going to be helpful for this in reinforcing these behavior patterns. And then journaling is another one. You go to your journal and write about, okay, here's a scary situation that happened, here's something that I did, here's how I should have handled it. And then the next time a scary thing happens, if you continually reinforce these messages, try to implement something different. Now, if you automatically respond in your same old default behavior pattern, don't kick yourself for it. Just start thinking, oh, I should have done it this way, and start rewiring that. You can even practice this out with people. You know, if nothing else, sit in front of your mirror and say, okay, here's how I would have said it. Incorporate it into your system. And then once you've done that, eventually you're going to be able to start rewiring this, and you're going to start dealing with things differently. And then the ultimate goal here is just to be capable of dealing with scary things in different ways. So it's not just this robotic, every time I run into something terrifying, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did when I was a little kid and I don't think about it. You're going to have choices, you're going to have options, and you're going to be way more empowered. And that's it. That's how you can take the fear responses, recognize what they are, and turn them into something to improve yourself and improve the situations around you. As I mentioned in this video, one of the things you can do to really fixate on both the trends and rewiring yourself is to journal. If you've not already seen it, check out the My Reality Generator, which is a guided journal which helps with a lot of this kind of thing and allows you to free journal, does all sorts of exercises related to dealing with stuff in your life and conflict. MyRealityGenerator.com.